You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi everyone, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This week I'd like to bring you something a little bit different. I recently published the audiobook version of my book, Becoming an Entrepreneur, How to Find Freedom and Fulfillment as a Business Owner. And in this episode, I'm going to play you the introduction to the audiobook. You can get the audiobook on Amazon and also through Audible. And if you would like to do a review of the audiobook, I have review codes, so I can send you a free review copy. If you would like to do a review, just get in touch with me at jake@thevoluntarylife.com and I'll send you a review code. If reading is more your thing and you'd prefer to read the book, you can get it also in ebook and paperback form. And if you have friends that you want to encourage to be entrepreneurs, I think the paperback is a really nice gift to give them for Christmas. So you can find that on Amazon as well, and I'll put links in the show notes. I'll be back next week with another regular episode, and until then I hope you have a great week. And without further delay, here's the introduction to Becoming an Entrepreneur. Becoming an Entrepreneur, How to Find Freedom and Fulfillment as a Business Owner by Jake Desyllas. Narrated by Jake Desyllas. Introduction. Becoming an entrepreneur fundamentally changed my view on how to achieve freedom and fulfillment. Starting a business is the most liberating act that you can undertake in your life. It's a peak experience that will change you forever, regardless of the outcome. Entrepreneurship gave me the freedom to live every day as I choose. It enabled me to master challenges that once scared me. It gave me the opportunity to dedicate myself to work that is truly meaningful to me. For a long time, that work involved founding, growing, and finally selling a business. Today, the work that is most meaningful to me is helping others to free themselves through entrepreneurship. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. For most of my childhood, I lived in a communal squat in South London. The adults that I learned from were employees, not business owners. I grew up in a political atmosphere at home and school in which people were suspicious of business. I was taught the word capitalist as a pejorative at least a decade before I learned the word entrepreneur. I spent years in college and postgraduate research before it even occurred to me that I could start my own business. Like most people, I learned nothing in school about entrepreneurship. I wasn't even aware that it was a viable option. I got the same message from school that I heard from my parents. The key to a good life is a good job, and the key to getting a good job is getting good grades. Nonetheless, deep down, I knew I never wanted to work for anyone else. The prospect of spending life as an employee seemed like such a drag. I believed that it must be possible to do something more fulfilling with my life than working for other people, even though I didn't know what that would be. As I experimented with different kinds of work and postgraduate study, I could see people of my own age founding businesses in the first wild wave of internet startups during the boom years of the 1990s. I saw people of my generation grow and sell their businesses and retire early to do whatever they wanted with their days. That all looked like awesome fun. They didn't seem smarter than me, so I figured if they could do it, I could do it too. I became an entrepreneur at the age of 28 when I created a startup called Intelligent Space with one business partner. We defined Intelligent Space as a pedestrian movement consultancy. Our goal was to help architects, engineers, and property developers make the world a better place for pedestrians. Pedestrian flows are the lifeblood to the economy of cities. They are vital to all face-to-face retail. The presence or absence of people on foot can make a city street either a place you want to be in or one that feels dangerous. At the time, there were very few tools available to assist architects and developers in creating pedestrian-friendly designs. We developed computer simulations that mapped where people are likely to walk, which is often not the same as where architects or engineers think they should walk. We used science-based methods to turn pedestrian movement from an undervalued resource into a tangible and manageable asset. I was aware that the designs of many buildings and streets were terribly dysfunctional for pedestrians, and I saw an opportunity to help improve urban designs through the simulation of pedestrian flows. After starting the business, I began to realize how little I understood about entrepreneurship and how many mistakes I was making. I had technical skill, but I did not understand how to provide a service that was helpful. I had a lot of drive, but I wasn't clear about the purpose of my business. I avoided selling to clients because it was uncomfortable, even though it was the most important thing to do. I didn't have systems in place to track and analyze how my business was performing, so I didn't know about many problems until it was too late. I worked ridiculously long hours. Day-to-day operations were still very dependent on me, so I did a lot of work that I could have delegated. Because I didn't know what I was doing, the growth of my company was unsustainable. In the first year, we spent a lot of money on things that we didn't need, like the rental of a nice office. We had to cut back and fire people shortly after we completed our first big project because we didn't have any new projects lined up. I took on large debts to fund my business. I was personally on the hook for over £150,000, approximately $246,000 in loans. It was the biggest risk I had ever taken, and after 2 years, it did not look good. My education had trained me for life as a reliable employee and taught me nothing of what I needed to know to run a business. I was just making it up as I went along, and that wasn't working. I needed conscious principles to follow in making decisions about my business. I resolved to learn everything that I could about entrepreneurship and to start running the business in a more principled way as fast as I could. I read voraciously, paid for business coaching, and did a lot of rethinking. As I implemented what I was learning, the business went from one that lacked clear direction to a highly transparent and systematic operation. Intelligent Space became a very successful consultancy. It took 5 years to pay off the initial loans and achieve profitability. We continued to grow revenue and increase our profit margin until we sold the business to a multinational engineering company in a trade sale 2 years later. In the end, my little startup had a clearer purpose, more transparent business controls, and a higher profit rate than the huge multinational company that bought us. I worked as a director in the multinational company for 3 years as part of an earn-out agreement. Then I retired early, at the age of 38. About this audiobook. This audiobook is for you if you want to become an entrepreneur or if you already are one and want more freedom and fulfillment. I've set out the principles that helped me directly in becoming a successful entrepreneur. Although I use examples from my experience in starting a consultancy, the principles that I discuss in the audiobook are true for any industry. I've tried to express these ideas as simply as possible, avoiding technical language wherever possible. You don't need much background knowledge of business in order to understand the contents. I've drawn from a wide variety of sources, especially from other entrepreneurs. If you're interested in reading more about the principles that I adopted, you can find suggestions for further reading at the end of the audiobook. In a nutshell, these were my guiding principles. Be helpful. Make something people want. I hold a BA Honours First Class, an MSc with distinction, and a PhD. It was humbling to realize that such things are largely irrelevant in business. What counts is one's ability to be helpful and make something that people want. This is what Chapter 2, Something People Want, is about. Provide purpose. I started the business with only a vague idea of what I was doing. I came to understand that my most important responsibility was to provide a defining purpose and a clear vision for the venture. This is the subject of Chapter 3, You Provide the Purpose. Learn by selling. Although selling our services to potential customers was the last thing I wanted to do at first, I came to understand that it was the most important activity for my business. Chapter 4, Learn by Selling, explains how selling is the mechanism through which you learn to shape your business for the better. Measure everything. When I started my business, I was running from one emergency to the next. After my rethink, I adopted a very proactive approach to tracking and analysis. This is the subject of Chapter 5, The Unexamined Business is Not Worth Building. Don't spend it until you've got it. I learned the hard way that spending money until you run out is not a good plan. Instead, I came to adopt the approach of funding the business from earnings. This is the subject of Chapter 6, The Best Funding There Is. Make yourself redundant. I learned to stop increasing my responsibilities within the business and do the opposite. Extract myself from workflows as much as possible. This concept is explained in Chapter 7, Make Yourself Redundant. Revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. Instead of focusing on growth, I learned to focus on what matters for the health of the business: profit. This is the subject of Chapter 8, Profit is Sanity. Act despite uncertainties. I had to give myself permission to risk failure in order to achieve something remarkable. This is the subject of Chapter 9, JFDI, Just Fucking Do It. I did not adopt all these principles uniformly. In fact, I became conscious of them partly because of the mistakes I made when I didn't apply them. In struggling to become a better entrepreneur, I realized that my education and upbringing had all been geared towards becoming a lifelong employee. This is a very common experience, and it represents one of the biggest challenges to anyone starting their own business. Chapter 1, Breaking Free, is about overcoming your conditioning in order to make it as an entrepreneur. I encourage you to get in touch with me and tell me what you think about the ideas in this audiobook. I'd love to hear about your experiences with finding freedom and fulfillment through entrepreneurship. If you have constructive suggestions on how I can improve the audiobook and make it more helpful, I'd love to hear them too. You can email me at jake@thevoluntarylife.com.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email jake@thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevoluntarylife.com.